Here on Flow, we're speaking with Charles Mountain, the Senior Manager for Safety and Infrastructure. Thanks for joining us, Charles.
Morning, Ricky.
Now, there's been an announcement in the last 24 hours about a bypass for the Truro Township. That's been sought for some time, as I understand it. What's the RAA's view on it?
Well, both the Truro bypass and the Augusta Highway duplication, which I'll come to in a minute, are projects which we've advocated for some time and were in fact part of our submission to this particular budget. So we're very pleased that there's been a commitment to fund both of these particular projects. The Truro bypass in particular is really important because this is part of the key freight route, and we know that for some time there's been a call for this to happen in conjunction with other works on the Sturt Highway and the heavy vehicle bypass through the back of the hills as well. So the introduction of this particular piece of the corridor improvement is most welcome, and when completed, will make a significant difference to the efficient movement of freight through this area.
So with that one, is there that's bypassing Truro? There's a bit of winding that goes through to Accommodation Hill. Is there something you're seeking in the longer term towards duplicating in that direction as well?
Yes, ultimately we think in conjunction with the Truro bypass is a duplication of the Sturt Highway as well, as far as Truro and potentially beyond, and also ongoing improvements to the route that runs from Truro through to the back of the hills and comes out the other side of the Murray Bridge and joins into the Duke's Highway. So ideally, once all these pieces are completed, we'll see a high-quality, efficient corridor which will be attractive for heavy vehicles to use as an access into and out of Adelaide. The long-term intention, of course, is to ultimately reduce the demand for heavy vehicles coming down the Southeastern Freeway as far as possible. So this is a really important part of that first improvement of that freight route.
So are you talking about ultimately potentially getting that going down through down the bottom of the hills there and across the back of Sedan Cambrai?
Yes, that's right. So there currently is an existing heavy vehicle route that runs through there, and there was a commitment for, I think, $12 million to do some minor upgrades so far. Again, that work has to be completed, but once that's done, that will bring some improvements. But again, this is all part of progressively improving that critical corridor.
Yeah, great. And so you mentioned also the Augusta Highway and some duplication there. Have you got a costing on how much what you're expecting there?
Well, this one, there's been an additional $148 million allocated for additional duplication works. Previously, there was $100 million allocated as part of the overall package of works to commence the duplication, so this is most welcome. There's been calls by us and most other organisations and the community really to look at fast-tracking duplication of this critical corridor to the north and the west of the state. So this additional funding means the project will be able to go further. Bearing in mind there's already a lot happening on this route with the duplication of the Joy Belush Bridge and, of course, the works that are happening at the intersection with the Copper Coast Highway and Augusta Highway, and also the duplication of work through Port Wakefield itself, which has also received some additional funding as part of this package of works.
Yeah, so do you have an idea how far that duplication might get to? Does it get through Red Hill and Lockhill, for instance?
Look, it's a bit hard to say with the information that we've got to date. Obviously, the intention is to get as far as possible. We do know once the project is up and rolling, of course, it becomes easier to extend the project once the design is done. So we'll have to wait and see what that translates to in terms of number of kilometres of duplicated highway on the ground. But the fact that we've got additional funding for this obviously means it can go further than previous. And again, every investment on this corridor becomes an improvement in safety and efficiency, particularly with the high number of heavy vehicles that use this corridor on a daily basis, and it's also an important tourism route as well.
Yeah. So when we've spoken previously about road maintenance and the need to make sure that we've just talked about arterial roads, if you like, those other roads that councils are responsible for maintaining. Is there additional money that you've sought or that you're aware of has been announced so far in the federal budget for councils and updating those sort of secondary but significant roads?
We haven't seen any additional funding. I haven't gone through all that detail to see if there's been any allocation of funding specifically for local government roads. Certainly in terms of the state-maintained roads, what we have done is called for additional maintenance funding to be provided as part of our state budget package, because we understand the importance of ensuring that the existing network that we've got is upgraded. And we've already seen a number of projects occurring, such as, apart from improving the actual road seal, but projects that incorporate things such as shoulder sealing, local road widening in places, and roadside hazard protection as well, and improving some of the road junctions as well. So as part of that ongoing maintenance program for the whole of the regional road network is really critical, and we're glad to see there was quite a strong commitment in the last budget, and with some successive tranches of funding through things such as the road safety program, which has enabled work to be fast-tracked across the network.
You mentioned when you talk about the Augusta Highway and also the Truro project in the region of 140 to 160 million for those works. The Hove situation in metropolitan Adelaide and the need to go over a railway line or send a railway line underneath, I understand that funding is about 170 million, but that's not actually going to fully pay for that project, if you like, whereas I expect that largely the Truro project would be paid for with the 160 million. What still needs to be done to get that Hove project completed?
Look, there's a number of issues with this, and it's currently being considered, I think, by the Department of Transport, and it's out for consideration with the community as well. People in the area would be aware there were two options presented, whether the road goes over or the road goes under, essentially, of the rail line. The challenge is, or the rail over and the rail under, so they all got their pros and cons. The community preference, we understand at this stage, is for the rail line to go under the road, but that presents a number of significant challenges, we understand, from an engineering perspective, which would have to be resolved. One of the problems is that there's a high groundwater level, for example, so taking the rail underneath effectively means it's almost encased in water, so that could present some particular engineering challenges to undertake that project, and obviously to maintain the long-term integrity of the structure as well. So that's the challenges. So we understand they're still working through these options at the moment. It's probably something that if you have an opportunity to follow up with the Department of Transport to get an update and see where they're at too with that.
There was a comment made here at the studios this morning. It does seem you get more bang for your buck in a regional road than you might in terms of how much road you get built in the metropolitan area when you look at those two examples.
Well, that's exactly right, and that highlights, I suppose, the complexity when you're building in a very tight inner city environment or metropolitan environment. Whereas on the road, in most cases, you can get a lot of value, as you say, in terms of things, and particularly we see this in things such as shoulder sealing, which makes a big difference on roads which have a fairly narrow carriageway to start with. So adding those extra 1.5 to 2 metres of sealed shoulders, in conjunction with some improvements to roadside hazards and better line marking, etc., make a huge difference to the safety and effectiveness of these corridors where these treatments are introduced. And I'm sure your listeners will appreciate that when you're driving on roads which have got good shoulders, good line marking, and wide lanes, it makes the driving a pleasure. Once you go into these roads where you don't have sealed shoulders and the carriageway is somewhat narrow, they can be a lot more challenging and demanding and quite unforgiving, of course. And it's interesting, as we're going into wet weather now, of course, we see shoulders unsealed in particular can become soft and boggy, and that obviously can be potentially quite dangerous, particularly if you're towing a trailer.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're probably too early to get you to give a report card on the budget. We haven't seen it all yet, but we'd like to catch up with you after it's all out there and see what your feeling is then.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the opportunity to talk to you further.